This video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your art portfolio website or online store to sell your work, check out Squarespace. They have marketing tools and analytics, so you can build a beautiful online presence and run your business.
Which artists influenced you the most, and what do you like about their work?
I think a lot of my peers are being influenced by Todd McFarlane and Jim Lee, all the guys from the 90s a lot, and I'm no different. But on top of that, Art Adams and a lot of Japanese artists are big influences of mine too. I think if you only try to have yourself influenced by a few or one artist, then you really are limiting your ability to grow creatively. Even if it's a new artist right now, they're young or whatever, if I think there's something I can learn from them, I'll go and study and try to pick up whatever that X factor magic element is.
Is there one or two that you've studied the most?
Oh yes, I say Jim Lee, and
Jim
then there's a Japanese artist called Takahiko Inoue. It's doing a book called Vagabond. It's been going on for many years, like a decade almost, I think.
Yeah.
And he was known for Slam Dunk and all these other manga back in the days. Yeah.
Nice. So what do you like about their work?
With Jam, it's because there's energy, and every artist provides a different kind and level of energy to their work. But Jim Lee it was just something that I personally love, and I think obviously everyone loves it enough that he's one of the top artists in history, comic book artists in history. And with Takahiko Inoue, it's a manga style artwork, but it's very realistic, and that was very rare. And back then, it was I was so captivated by it. I tried to study and try to draw and learn whatever I can from what I see and like about his artwork. I felt like there's the other manga artists or the other comic book artists aren't giving me stuff from that these two guys are giving me.
Yeah. Who's your cartoon crush?
Wow, that's hard.
It's hard? You got too
many?
That
is hard. I think as a kid, it was probably Firestar. That old, the Spider-Man and Friends cartoon back then? In the 80s, I think there was the Spider-Man and his amazing friends, and there was Spider-Man and Iceman and Firestar. And I was like, I want a girlfriend just like her.
Which artist influenced you the most, and what did you like about their work?
Oh, wow. My all-time favorite is Michael Golden. Okay. If you're familiar with his work, he's Bronze Age comic artist, but he's one of those guys that once you start going down the rabbit hole, you see his influences. You see Alex Raymond, and then before him, you may see a Milton Caniff, maybe a Frank Robbins. I just kept going back to kind of the essence, the start of the whole genre. A lot of it is because of their brushwork, very bold and detailed, elaborate. Even for that time, they were so ahead of their time. We're talking about Milton Caniff, 1940s. You look at his work now, if you see his work, you think he's an artist out today. Very, very forward in his work. And then Michael Golden, he's just one of the staples in the comic side of things. So those two guys, for the most part, with everyone else in between that's influenced by those guys.
Which artists influenced you the most, and what did you like about their work?
Most of the Mad Magazine artists, Bill Elder, a lot of the underground comics artists of the 60s and 70s. Dr. Seuss was a big influence on me. M.C. Escher was a big influence. Albrecht Dürer, but many others. I liked their work because there was energy in it. There was also skill in it. These artists seemed like they meant it. It wasn't just academic, it wasn't just an exercise. It was the kind of thing a kid would want to draw, but with grown-up skills.
That's good, I like that. Can I steal that?
Sure.
Which artist influenced me the most? Phil Hale was kind of the first guy that I saw that I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do stylized representational paintings of superheroes. That's basically what I wanted to do, with maybe a dark, moody, sort of horror bend to them. So when I saw his work, I was like, that's basically what I want to do. And what I like about his work is the mood, the shape design, the technical acumen, but also the ability to bend that technical acumen to his own personal opinion and not being limited by it. So that's the easiest answer.
So which artists have influenced your work the most, and what did you like about their work?
The artists that really maybe scratch my head and think, man, what are they doing that I need to do to get that kind of recognition? Humberto Ramos, right? Crazy with his proportion, amazing storyteller. He was just amazing with his style and his thought process, composition. Arthur Adams, the way he drew X-Men, the X-Babies, New Mutants back in the day. It felt like fine arts, but more a little caricaturized. And then Mark Silvestri, man, back in the day, the old school stuff. It really felt like fine arts, told in a beautiful way on his X-Men run and Wolverine run and stuff like that.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Which artists influenced your work the most, and what did you like about them?
Artists that influenced me the most, I mean, I grew up mostly on like a lot of Disney, a lot of anime, and a lot of comics. So I always loved artists like Glen Keane, and a lot of those kind of classic Disney artists, and a lot of comic book artists like Adam Hughes, James Jean. And I always loved like the animated movies and just how full of like life and expression and the big eyes, and just how fun and fluid that kind of art form is. I always loved that kind of art, just full of expression and full of life, and that's what I knew I wanted to draw, something like that when I grew up.
What superpower would be most useful to an artist?
Probably be speed. I wish I could draw like way faster than I do. I wish I could be like the Flash and just get like all my art done really, really quick.
I'm TJ Geisen, work at Riot as an illustrator right now. There are a lot of people to admire nowadays. So about a year or two ago, I became obsessed with Sergei Kolosov.
That sounds like the correct pronunciation.
I first fell in love with his work for Dishonored 2. And so he did a lot of the concept art and a lot of the illustrations for that. I fell in love with his work there. His use of just like values and implied gesture and just like the way he plays with anatomy, especially like hands. I guess it feels very European. I became really attracted to that. The core of my art style comes from anime style, all that influences. And then I kind of totally flipped over to like fine art. And I think Sergei's work is kind of like that beautiful in-between of like the graphic, trendy kind of style, but with like a fine arts sophistication to it. Nice. I mean, aside from him, of course, I love like the Marvel work, like Ryan Meinerding, who, him along with his team created all the Marvel Cinematic Universe designs that we love. I was looking at the Sideshow figurines in there, and of course, Riot. That's one of the main things that attracted me going to that company, is knowing who I would be in league with. So there's a whole lot of Riot artists, particularly the splash artists. There's Alvin Lee, Jessica Olenart, Kelly Elshire, Bo Chen, Chengwei Pan, just like the whole crew there, as well as like Simon Dubuc, who does concept art, Jason Chan, legendary. It's just way too much talent. Anyone with talent, they suck up. And they all have this influence of like the American comics with anime style. I think influenced a lot of us growing up. But yeah, it all culminates into this super cool, like fantasy, modern, fashionable video game like style, and that's what I love. So I'm currently in the process of really absorbing everything I can about the Riot House style, and then I want to start enriching it with what I can do.
What's your name?
Cutter Hayes.
What do you do?
I'm an illustrator. I have 4 published books and 4 more on the way, and I pretend to paint.
You pretend to paint? I
pretend to paint.
Where can people find your stuff? How do they follow you?
CutterHayes.com, WildOutShoe.com. I know that's complicated. It's on the front of the book cover. MouseNight.com, Vast.us.
Okay.
All over the place.
Your biggest art influences, like
attention, yeah. The exhibit hall will be closing. So not that guy. Not that guy. Not that guy. Definitely my biggest influence. Definitely Mobius. Mobius was a huge influence. I met him and ran into him really late in life, meaning 18. Somebody came to me and said, "Hey, look, this guy draws like you." And I looked at it when I said, no, I draw like this guy, but he's like 50 years ahead of me, you know? And then I met him, and I would hang out at his booth during Comic-Con for hours. I mean, all day I just watch him draw. And then one year, his agent, Mark Losfer, said, hey, sir, this boy has been here for 8 years watching you draw. And so Mobius saw that I had a sketchbook, and he goes like this. And I was like, oh my God, if this guy says one bad thing about my art, I'm done, I'm never drawing again. But he took me behind the booth, and I handed him my sketchbook, and at a Comic-Con, he took an hour to go through my sketchbook.
Wow.
Yeah, right? And he sat down with me, and he took an hour really carefully looking, and he didn't say anything. And I was like nervous, I was so nervous.
He didn't say anything for an hour?
He didn't say anything for an hour. I mean, yeah, that's a true story.
Oh, man.
And then at the end, he closed it. I pointed at the last page, he signs it, and he hands it back. And I was like sweating bullets. And he goes, the passion, the fire, the spirit of your work is all there. Now you need to work on the refinement of your line, on your dexterity, on the commercial aspect of your line. And I said, Master, how do I do that? And he said, live with a brush behind your ear and a bottle of ink in your pocket for 4 years. Never use a pen, never use a pencil, anything else, even for schoolwork, even for notes. And then come back and see me. And I did what he said. I literally ruined shirts and destroyed brushes left and right, and I did it. And I probably put 40 hours a week of inking in for 4 years. And when I came back, I couldn't believe it, but the guy remembered me. After all the guys that guy's seen, you know, and he holds his hand out for my sketchbook, and I put it into his hands, and this time he went through it in 4 minutes. He was just flip, 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 and he goes, good, you are ready. Now go get a job quickly before you are too old.
You are ready.
So I went across the aisle to Dennis Kitchen Sink Press, and I handed him my sketchbook, and I said, Mobius told me to get a job. He looks over at Mobius, Mobius goes, and that was my first job.
What the hell?
For real, true story.
Wow.
So Mobius, I would say Frank Frazetta, I'd say all my teachers were really strong influences. Jeff Watts, Ron Lemon, they were absolutely fantastic teachers. I couldn't have gotten better teachers. I got lucky. Steve Root is a good friend of mine, and I visit him twice, 3 times a year, and we're always working on projects. He's always helping me with my stuff. He's been a huge help and a big influence. Yeah, those guys.
Which artists influenced your work the most, and what did you like about their work?
I have a lot of influences, I guess, throughout the years. If you're thinking like classical or old school, I would go Klimt is huge. I love Klimt. I love Sheely. Recently, it's been Sergio Toppi. I love his work. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but his graphic novels are just mind-boggling. Like his work is that beautiful mix of storytelling with fine art, beautifully designed. So definitely recommend checking out his work if you're not familiar with him. That's about it. I can't think of anybody right now like on the spot.
Which artists influenced your work the most, and why did you like their work?
For comics, I would say Jeff Smith is probably my biggest influence. I love the Bone series. The way that it's essentially a Sunday strip smashed together with an epic fantasy is amazing. When I was a little bit younger, it was definitely Bill Watterson with Calvin and Hobbes. And I didn't realize it until recently. I was going through like old drawing piles, and I mean old, like I was probably like 5 or 6, just like big scribbles. I was like, oh wow, Calvin and Hobbes. Proof I was a fan.
When I was a kid, it was John Byrne, who was doing Uncanny X-Men. And he actually was fast enough to draw 2 to 3 stellar books a month, which is amazing. I mean, no one does that anymore, right? And then when I was 16, I came down here for the first time. Artist Alley was John Byrne, George Perez, Chris Claremont was sitting next to John Byrne with a typewriter, working on an Uncanny X-Men script. Terry Austin, who used to ink John, was on the other side. And then the new kid on the block was on the corner. And the new kid on the block was Bill Sienkiewicz, and he was doing his first Marvel previews work. They were singing, they were laughing, they were having a great time. It's like, I want to do that for a living. But Bill is the total inspiration, because Bill, and it's another piece of advice for young artists. It's like, sometimes people are afraid of like being clones of somebody else, but nobody stays that way. Because Bill back then, he was a Neil Adams clone. and he evolved. He took that stuff, he grabbed Bob Peak, he took all this illustration techniques, rolled it all together and made it his own. So I think the stigma of starting off looking just like a Jeff Campbell or whoever, you're not going to stay that way. If you're in the right mindset and you want to keep getting better, you're not going to stay that way.
I'm Karl Kopinski here at San Diego Comic Con 2019. You can find my work all over Instagram mainly. That's probably the best place. And through my website, I've got various books and karlkopinski.com. Oh, who am I talking to now? Christian?
No, you just twist yourself towards me, but don't move.
Okay.
Who are the artists that influenced you the most, and what did you like about their work?
There is a very, very long list, but if I was to talk about the ones that influenced me the most, probably people like Sargent and Velázquez and Ernest Mazzonier and Ilya Repin is a huge influence. And that was just from going to museums and pouring through books. And then a few of the guys I've come across in my career and had the sort of look to work with and actually have conversations with. So John Gee's been great because I've spent a lot of time actually communicating with him in our own special way. Some of the guys I work with at Games Workshop are Paul Dainton, Adrian Smith, Phil Hale, I'm a big fan of. It's nice to see somebody take the comic book route initially and then go down the fine art route, and Kent Williams as well, again, has done a similar path. So those kind of guys are quite inspiring for me.
The guys you mentioned in the beginning, what did you like about their work?
It's so hard to put your finger on. I mean, it's kind of depressing because people are always telling me about an artist I didn't know who lived 200 years ago who would have kicked my arse. They're so good. The level was so high and they were taught in such a rigorous and effective manner, and the kind of way that I wish I'd been taught. Repin, because he's got that Eastern European thing going on, it's all a bit more hard-edged and rough, and it's not quite as romanticised and flamboyant as the Italian and the French artists of that period. And Sargent, just for his obvious, guy's just it's just showboating. Every painting looks like he's showboating, and I love the fact that you can go and see them in the museum and you can see a moment of activity captured from 150 years ago. You can see that flick of the wrist, the brushstroke put down, and it's a moment in time that's captured forever. So I love that as well about them. Really sort of fires me up, that kind of thing.
Which artists influenced your work the most, and what did you like about them?
There's an artist named Ian Miller who was an illustrator for Warhammer 40K, and he also illustrated a Tolkien bestiary. Just an all-around amazing artist. He did backgrounds for Cool World and other animated series as well. It was the drawings that he did for Warhammer when I was in high school, and I was playing a lot of Warhammer 40K because there was a Games Workshop right across the street from my high school. I would just pore over those books, and his illustrations were always the ones that caught my attention the most. One of the reasons was because there was so much lush detail in them, but it wasn't just the detail that drew me in, it was the fact that he could have so much lush detail, but still had an image that was crafted in such a way where it wasn't busy, it didn't feel like it was busy just to be busy, right? And that you got lost in it sort of visually and didn't know where to look. He guides you through his images very purposefully, but there's just so much going on, there's so much depth to his work. And actually Ian Miller and I have kind of become friends since I got to meet him at IllexCon years ago, and we've traded artwork, and I even commissioned him to do a piece for me, and he's a real sweetheart, but he was a huge influence on me creatively in those early days when I was in high school.
Which artist influenced your work the most, and what did you like about their work?
Wow, which artist influenced me the most? That's a really hard question to answer because I have so many influences. I love comic books growing up. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to actually be a graphic novel artist in France and for Marvel Comics as well. So anything from like John Byrne to John Romita Jr. to all the French comic book artists and Belgian comic book artists. Hugo Pratt, who's Italian, I think. Brescia, who's from South America. Mangas later. Anything but animation. I actually did not care for animation at all growing up. That just came right after. And then all the classic painters, all the Impressionists, NCYF, Andrew Wyeth, Remington, Norman Rockwell, Carl Larson. I mean, too many to mention, but yeah.
What did you like about some of those favorites?
The mood. I remember as a kid, we had those like history books, and they had all those paintings of Rockwell, which is this like painter from the Middle Ages, and he did all those scenes, and they had this particular mood, like it was always overcast, and it was like a fall day. And I remember being drawn to them as a kid, and there was tons of characters, and these are some of my favorite things to paint. Yeah. So that's definitely something that attracted me to them, yeah.
What artists influenced your work the most, and what did you like about their work?
The artists that influenced me the most were Frank Frazetta, Mobius, and Robert Crumb. I've got hundreds of other influences, but those three guys, I sort of loosely patterned my career after Frank Frazetta's career. He did movie posters, so I did movie posters. He did album covers, so I did album covers. He worked on Little Annie Fanny, I worked on Little Annie Fanny. And then Mobius, we became really good friends and we collaborated together on a number of projects. And he gave me some very powerful advice, which was, Bill, you have achieved excellence as an artist. Now it is time for you to move on and to move up and use your work for the good of society. And I started turning down any jobs that did not make the world a better place. And that had a profound effect on me personally, and it also made me very proud of the work that I was doing. With Robert Crumb, when I saw his story, Joe Blow, in one of the Zaps, I was stunned. I thought at that moment, wow, we can do anything in comics. There are no limits now. This is a spectacular medium. And I began to do lots of underground comics. Harvey Pekar also, he showed that in his comic book, American Splendor, that you could make compelling stories in comics about something as seemingly mundane as being a file clerk in a hospital. It just really opened my eyes to the possibilities of comics.
Which artists influenced you the most, and what did you like about their work?
Okay, right now I'm very inspired by the old masters, Caravaggio and William Bouguereau and Jérôme, all the French artists and Italian masters like Antonio Chiseri. So everything is in the museums right now. So I go often to Paris, to the Louvre and the Museo d'Orsay, or in Florence and Rome. There are amazing art. So I'm a lot inspired from these artists. And from Frazetta, Boris Vallejo, Norman Rockwell. I think there is a kind of line from the French school in the 1800s to Norman Rockwell. So if you check the history, Norman Rockwell was studying from the artist of that time. So it's like a line.
Yeah, the family tree type of thing.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Which artists have influenced me the most? So, I'm 41 now. I started off when I was a teenager. So there's been many, many people that have kind of left their mark along my path. For some reason, I'm thinking about Proko's butt video. Really explained a lot of stuff to me. So that really helped. Definitely check that out.
The butt video?
Yeah, it was great.
That was the artist that influenced you the most? Was my butt video?
I don't know if it was the most, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Wow.
Also, Carcamo, Gonzalo Carcamo, he's a watercolor painter. He's fantastic. I don't know, I only have this butt video in my head now. So I guess I'm gonna just stop there.
That's great.
So who are your art heroes? While doing research for this video and looking up artists, we noticed a bunch of them don't actually have their own websites. What? If you're a professional artist or just want your work to get out there, you need a site to display your art. Back in my day, I had to code sites from scratch or use clunky plugins. But now we've got Squarespace to make all that easy. Squarespace is a great way to quickly set up a portfolio site and get eyes on your work. You can sell art right off your site or start a business to bill for your design services. And if you want to transfer your art from Instagram, Twitter, or wherever else, Squarespace has you covered with easy importing. You can even auto-post your work simultaneously to Twitter, Facebook, or Tumblr, all with the proper optimizations, tags, and descriptions. If you run into any problems, Squarespace has 24/7 email support from team members who are inside Squarespace's office, who typically respond within 1 hour. If all that sounds good to you, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Proko to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video, and thanks again to all the artists that participated in the interviews. So let us know, what artists have influenced you the most? Let me know in the comments so I can check them out. If you like videos like this, show us some love by hitting the like button and ringing the bell. It makes us and the YouTube algorithm happy babies. All right, see you all next time.